Hello everyone, Cone Dodger here, continuing on our 90s Japanese engine recreation mini-series. Going to do one more Honda motor and then move on to some Mitsubishi motors, or TSM motors. We're going to start out with the Honda D16Y7. There are like 30 D-series motors to choose from. They made just tons of revisions on them. I've decided to stick with the D16Y7 because in the little bit of research I did, it was the most optimal engine in that lineup. It's the most sought after. So I figured that would be the best option to kind of narrow it down, because I could drive myself crazy making these tiny little minute changes to this engine to make it into the 30 other versions of it. So we're going to start with this one. So starting off, these are older engines to start off. They are, the early 90s kind of motor, pre-B series. I honestly should have started with these, or this motor, before I did the B series ones. I wasn't sure if I was going to do these or not, but I had a couple of requests to do some of them, so I'll go back a little bit and work on some of these. I think I'm going to stick with 94. Let's see, this is inline 4, obviously. It's aluminum block. They were using aluminum blocks with iron sleeves on the pistons. The bore is only 70, not that small, but 75, and the stroke is 90. So unlike those B series motors, it's not a very square engine. It's definitely very under square, and probably partially because of that, they are not extremely high revving engines. The whole bottom end is pretty plain. We're just gonna go cast on everything for now. Yeah, okay on quality. Go 7. On the top end, they are single overhead cam. But although they are single overhead cam, they are single overhead cam 4 valve per cylinder motors. That's kind of a rarity. That's not something you often hear about. But there were drawbacks to that. There's only so much you can do with the lift and duration on a 4 valve per cylinder single overhead cam. But they made it work pretty well. The compression ratio is 9.6 to 1, so we're almost right there. And cam profile, I'll leave at 40. They are not VVT, but this motor is a VVL motor, or VTEC. So I'm gonna go with this 40-60 split for now. We'll come back and adjust that later. It is definitely the more brown style. We'll go with a wrinkle black, like so. That looks about right. Aspiration, they're naturally aspirated. Injection. Now, some of these motors were single point EFIs. The D16Y7, however, used a multi-point setup. It didn't look like this. It actually looks similar to a single point, but it's actually just a throttle body there with injectors on the runners here. So it is a multi-point. So this doesn't look correct, but it's the correct configuration for what the motor was. I'll say a standard airbox, regular unleaded, pretty middle of the road on our fuel mixture. Not too extreme on timing. And as I mentioned earlier, red line was at 6,800. The fuel cut was at 7,200. So we'll say 6,900. If it ends up staying together, I'll raise that, but I kind of have my doubts. A couple bumps up on the quality there. We'll say these are short cast on the headers. Probably a 2-inch exhaust system. 3-way cat. And we'll go with a reverse, so we'll go with a straight through within a reverse flow. That seems to be the setup that works best for these motors, and it seems to be similar to what Honda was using in that era. Okay, so pretty simple motor, so pretty quick little build up there. Numbers are 127 horsepower at 6,600 RPM and 107 foot-pounds of torque at 5,500 RPM. So quite a bit less than the B16 motors, but pretty respectable for an early 90s 1.6 liter, that's for sure. Some of those early D-Series motors were well sub 100 horsepower motors, so this was a pretty big advancement. So let's see what kind of ballpark we're in. Close. That was really close. Just a hair bit too much torque and a hair too little horsepower. So I'm going to bump up the secondary cam just a little bit. See if we can gain a few horsepower there. I didn't notice maybe the bottom end was actually staying together, so I may raise that rev limit out here. 127 horsepower. I'm not gonna complain about that. That's yeah, we are having some mean time between failure problems with that bottom end, but as we've done before, we're kind of gonna overlook that for now. I'll bump this all the way up just to see if that will fix anything. I did clear that up, so we'll call that done. So this is the, let's go ahead and name it, D16, no, D16Y7. Save on that one. Those, alrighty. Did that one also? Yeah, it did. Lined up with the rest of its Honda counterparts. It must know, surely it has nothing to do with the alphabetical order or anything. So, moving on. It's time to get out of this Honda silliness and move on to some DSM silliness. We're going to move on to the Mitsubishi / Diamond Star Motors 4G63, or also known as the 4G63T. It's an inline 4 once again, with a cast iron block. The bore is going to be 85, and the stroke is going to be 88. So a fairly square engine. That gives you a capacity of 1,997 cc, or basically 2 liters. This motor features a cast iron crank. I haven't been able to find a ton of information on the specifics of the motor. It's another one of those ones. It's everybody seems to have a different opinion about, and it's the wiki page is very poorly done. The way it's written is not very straightforward, and there's no real good information source that I found on the specifics of this motor. I know there's 2 generations. There's a 6-bolt and a 7-bolt, and that refers to how many bolts are on the flywheel, connecting the flywheel to the crank. I've decided to stick with the earlier 6-bolt motor. It seems to be the more favorable of the 2, and it's the bottom end. I couldn't find any concrete information on, but it's not a particularly high revving engine, so I'm hoping hoping we can kind of get away with maybe just some cast and hypereutectic. That's similar to what the Nissan motors we did earlier used. If I find better information on that in the future, I will come back to it. I'm going to go a 7 on quality. Seems to be a good place to start. Top end, we're going with a dual overhead cam. I just had a brain. My brain just had a moment. Did I select an aluminum head on that D series motor? I hope so. We'll go back to that after I'm done with this one and double check. But these are dual overhead cam 4 valve per cylinder motors. Compression, oops, aluminum on that. Compression is super low. 7.8. That is the lowest compression motor we've built so far. That's partially why these are so easily modified motors. You can add a ton of boost to these things and they'll take it. And I'm gonna guess that low compression had a pretty good little, part in that. Cam profile, I'm gonna leave 40. No VVT or VVL featured. Styling is kind of that rounded look, I guess, is what. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm having to stick with. Let me look through those again. If there's a style that's missing in this lineup, it's the style with the coil pack running down the middle. So there's no. It would be like this, but there's a covered piece in the middle, so you don't see these holes here. Not that that's overly important. It's just one of those things that I've noticed is kind of missing. They are typically red, similar to that, and with a black center, so that looks pretty close. Aspiration, we finally get to go back to a turbo motor. I haven't built one of those in a while. Single turbo, we'll say a medium air to air. Small's too small, medium's too big, but it's a good, again, middle of the road option. For these early generations, they were using a little bit different turbo than what we were used to, the T25. They did change to a T25 later on, but they were actually using a bigger turbo on the first ones. They changed due to turbo lag issues. But I'm going to stick with a baseline performance to start with. The boost is, from what I've read, between 8 and 12. Again, not a concrete answer on that, so it's something I'll play with to get the numbers we need. Fuel system is multi-point EFI. No, not throttle point. Not throttle per cylinder. That'd be cool, but no. I will say performance intake, and we'll go with just premium unleaded. I don't think we're gonna need super. We'll go pretty rich. They're not known to be the most efficient engines around. They certainly ran a little bit on the rich side, from what I can tell. We'll go pretty far on timing. And as I mentioned earlier, not too high of a RPM limit. 7,100 is about the highest that I saw. So we'll start with that, and if we need to move it down, we can. Exhaust, we don't have any options there, just the short cast. And we'll go with a 2¼ inch exhaust. That should be safe. Three-way cat, we'll go with that same setup of a straight through and reverse flow. And we will start this puppy up. Now we are looking for 195 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 203 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000. So it's making its power pretty low. So that's why I didn't want to go any higher with the cam unless I have to. So let's start that up and see where we're at. There's a noise you haven't heard in a while. Okay, well, we do have some MTBF issues. I'm gonna back down maybe one click on the red line. 7,000 was where the red line would start, so we'll go one click down on that. The power was just a hair low, so I'm just gonna go a few clicks up on the boost, and the numbers are coming in right about the correct spot. So if nothing goes too astray here, we could be looking at a pretty easy build. Sharp torque curve as soon as it hits the boost. All right, still having issues with the MTBF. We'll go up on the quality there. I'm guessing it's probably connecting rods. We'll see if the forged H-beams would solve that. We're a little short on torque and a little high on horsepower, so I may take a click off the cam profile. Alrighty, yep, that took care of the bottom end issues. Still not a super long living engine, but that sounds about right. I know I'm gonna catch some hate from the DSM guys for that, but these are not known to be the most reliable engines in the world. They have some head gasket issues, valve seal issues, and bottom end issues. I'm not saying they were bad engines. They certainly made some stellar high power engines, both in the Eclipses and the Evos. It's one of those motors that people have made, 1,000 horsepower plus 4 cylinders out of. So it's not that it's a bad motor. They were just kind of plagued by some quality issues. But let's see. So what I'm gonna do is gonna take a little off the cam profile. We'll see what that does. Balancing that torque to horsepower ratio is kind of a it's a tricky balance because you go way too far really quick. That's what I just done there. Taking a lot more power than I needed and didn't have any torque. So what does that help? Increase quality on the top end. Do a quick test. There's a 199 and a 195. Okay. Bump one quality up there. I think I may call it that. Especially since I have the horsepower and the torque in the right RPM ranges, and the horsepower was dead on. So hopefully that solves some of our quality issues as well. Give it a little tiny bump up there. But one thing I'd like to note about it is the material cost and the man hours significantly lower than, say, the SR or the RB motors. So in our little lineup here in our inventory, this is a very valuable engine to me to have, because it's kind of in the middle. It's a turbo motor that's a little bit cheaper to build and a little bit more accessible. So this is the 4G63. I'm gonna call it the 4G63T. It's not always referred to as that, but it's going to. I'm gonna call it that so that it's easier for me to remember which one it is exactly. So let's save that one. Alrighty, so we've got our, where'd you go? D16Y7. I wanted to check that. Rise real quick. Oh, I did. Someone's probably yelling at me for that. Top end. I'm glad I remembered at least. We should have gone with aluminum and left it as cast. So this should only help our MTBF. Shouldn't affect many other specifications. Well, it did help our mean time between failure a ton. It kind of hurt the power a little bit, so I'm just going to come up on the quality a hair. Not too much. We'll go to 127. Alrighty, so that's that one fixed. Sorry about that. Easy little fix for an oversight. Here we go. Now we've got our D16Y7 fixed, and we have a 4G63T. Let me look at that. Power 195 versus what I would say is a comparable motor, the SR20. Where's that one at? Is that one down the list? So it's a little bit less on power, but the MCO is almost 2,000 on this one, and only 919 on this one. So huge difference in price, and that's going to be important later on. I can see it's much heavier as well, 310 pounds versus 277, so that's another thing to take into consideration in the future. I've been keeping up with development on the main game itself pretty well, and it looks like we are creeping closer to getting that car designer studio working. If you aren't watching their dev streams at night, here in the States anyway, it's at night, I highly recommend doing that. It's very cool to see the progress, and you can chat with the developers directly. It's a very friendly atmosphere, and a lot of fun to see this all coming together. So please do tune into that. Once again, please go on to Steam and greenlight the game. The link is always in the description. If you have any more suggestions to motors we can add to this inventory, let me know. Otherwise, my name is Cododger, and thanks for watching.